full disclosure, I have been anxious to film this video. I know probably like 5 ENFJs, and they're all stellar. So when I sit here and try to give advice about what ENFJs need to work on, all I know are really great ENFJs. I've heard of stories from other people that have met unhealthy ENFJs, but all I know are really great ENFJs. So I'm like, okay, growth advice for these amazing people. ENFJs are some of the best communicators around. They are the mom of their friend group, the counselor of their friend group. They're really there for everyone. I've noticed a lot of ENFJs are passionate about really big social causes, and there's something about talking with an ENFJ that just seems like they're looking directly into your soul. Hey everybody, I'm Alexis. If you're new to my channel, I do have an Instagram account if you're interested in checking that out. I post more like list bite-sized things, whereas this video is more of like an in-depth video. I also do offer coaching, so if you want like personality type verification, or if you just want any coaching, or if you just want to pick my brain, you can DM me on Instagram. As a side note, I have been loving the conversations I've been having on Instagram, so you can just do like a little voice memo, you know? So as I get going, if any of this seems like it's not you, and there could be a mistype, I notice especially with a lot of FJs, they tend to be mistyped for whatever reason. I mean, there's mistyping with all the types, and most of the reason for that is just the tests are pretty reliably inaccurate. So even if you've got the same result for years and years and years, the test is reliable, but it's kind of like reliably wrong. In my experience, it's usually 1 letter off. Sometimes 2 letters off, they can usually get it that much correct, but it's usually 1 letter off, it seems like. So it's kind of important to look into that and see, you know, if there is a better option out there. You might want to look into the INFJ, the ESFJ, the ENTJ, and the ENFP, and maybe look into those and see if those make sense. If you're fresh off the 16 Personalities website, you just took the test, that's Myers Briggs. So you're familiar with like the 4 letters, I, E, S, N. But it actually goes like all the way back to the early 1900s with Carl Jung, and he coined what are called cognitive functions. It's basically 8 ways that people perceive the world and make decisions. And they've since hooked up different personality types to the EEG machine, and they find that certain personalities tend to rely on some regions of the brain more than other personalities do. And these kind of correlate to the cognitive functions. So after he coined the cognitive functions, Myers and Briggs came along and they said, okay, well, if you use this function and this function, we'll call you the ESFJ. If you use this function, we'll call you the INFP. But it was really just meant to be a code. And now it seems like all people know is I versus E, N versus S, but there's really a whole level deeper. So I'll kind of show you the code basically that Myers and Briggs came up with. So the middle 2 letters are kind of the meat of this, the N and the F. Everyone's second letter is called their perceiving letter. It's kind of how you take in and organize information. And everyone's third letter is considered their judging letter. It's not like a bad way of judging, but it's just how you make judgments, how you make decisions, how you decide things. Like ultimately, what criteria do you use to decide this is a better decision than this decision? So if you're a J, it means you show the world your judging letter. It means you extrovert your judging letter. So for you, that's F. So it means you extrovert your feelings. It means you're oriented on the external feelings. You're not so much oriented on your inner feelings. You're oriented on external feelings. How is the group feeling? And then that just automatically means you introvert your perceiving letter. So you're focused on your inner patterns, not necessarily the patterns going on out here. And then since you're an E, an extrovert, it means you predominantly prioritize the extroverted feeling, and you secondarily prioritize the introverted one, introverted intuition. So those make up your first 2 cognitive functions. Your first cognitive function is extroverted feeling. Your second cognitive function is introverted intuition. Out of the 8 cognitive functions that there are, every person uses 4, and they show up in kind of specific ways. So the way you find out your third cognitive function is it's the direct opposite of your second function. They're kind of like a yin-yang pulling at each other. They're the exact opposites, but together they come together and they complement each other. The opposite of introverted intuition, the opposite of introverted is extroverted. The opposite of intuition is sensing. So extroverted sensing is your third function. And that's the direct opposite of introverted intuition. There's inner patterns, and then there's external sensory information that you take in. Your fourth function is the direct opposite of your first function. So since your first function is extroverted feeling, the opposite of extroverted is introverted, the opposite of feeling is thinking, so introverted thinking is your fourth function. So there's like taking in the external group's feelings, and then there's how you on the inside think about things, and those are kind of opposites pulling at each other. But when you integrate them all, they kind of make a balanced, complete picture. After you watch this video, if you want like more in-depth explanations about the cognitive functions, or maybe you want like just further in-depth information about Myers Briggs, I do have a Myers Briggs 101 playlist that goes kind of chronologically from easy to more complex. And in that playlist, I do have several videos that go into more definitions about the cognitive functions. Like one is what are cognitive functions? One is what are the 4 types of extroverts? What are the 4 types of introverts? And in those 3 videos, I go into more detailed definitions of the cognitive functions. So your first cognitive function is extroverted feeling. It's the external feelings. And everyone's first function is who they feel like they are. You are using this function in many contexts of life. You use it at work, you use it at home, you use it in your finances, how you make food, basically every area of your life, people use their first function. So for you, you're basically always oriented toward the external feelings. Nowhere in these functions do you have any introverted feeling. You know what I mean? Like, you're not so much selfishly focused on your own internal feelings. You're always focused on the group's feelings, maybe even at the expense of yourself. ENFJs are the most likely type to be able to, based on looking at a person, know exactly what they're feeling just by looking at a person. ENFJs are great with their words, very motivational with their words. And it's because you're tapped into the external feelings. You know exactly what words would motivate people. You're so tuned into people. It makes ENFJs phenomenal orators and speakers. Extroverted feeling makes people very warm, because you're oriented toward other people's feelings. And so you want to make people feel at home, and it's warm and inviting. None of these functions really in themselves are actions that you would take. It's kind of a brain process, but because you use the certain brain process, it will lead to certain actions. So it might lead you to make your home more warm. Probably has some candles going. I put on a sweater because I notice a lot of FJs wear sweaters. I'm also wearing all black because it seems like all the NJs like black. And this is one of the functions that makes ENFJs great counselors, because they're so tuned into other people and other people's needs. And they tend to, counsel their friends, take care of their friends, the mom of the friend group, the counselor of the friend group. And there's something just so soft about ENFJ's speech. Any of the EFJs in general, they just speak in a really kind way. It's not blunt and harsh, like that. Like, when I'm around ENFJs, I get hey, how are you doing? It's so nice. I mean, ENFJs, especially when they're healthy, can really just feel like a warm hug. Like, you could just tell anything to these people. I feel just very safe around these people. And so, yeah, I would say this is a good function for ENFJs to use. You're probably using it already 95% of the time, and I would say that's a really good spot for you. Everyone's second function is not really as comfortable to go to because it's introverted. So, if you're an extrovert, you don't want to go to an introverted function. If you were an introvert, you wouldn't want to go to an extroverted function. It's just kind of out of people's comfort zones. And the analogy that I use with introversion and extroversion is that it's like food and water. And it's like that in that they're both needs. You might have a preference that you like food more than you like water, but you need them both. And that's how I feel like extroversion and introversion are. You have a preference for extroversion. It might give you more energy. You might enjoy it more. You might feel more like yourself. But ultimately, it's in your best interest and will give you the most fulfillment if you can stretch out of your comfort zone and to get into more introversion. And I have the same advice for introverts. To get out of your comfort zone, and for them, it's to get into extroversion. And the reason that you need both extroversion and introversion is because they give you 2 different things. Introverted functions kind of distill down to clarity and depth and wisdom, and extroverted functions kind of expand and they blast it out. And so if you get this deep wisdom with your introverted function, and then you can broadcast that to people, and then you can help people with it, that's really the ultimate mix, a deep impact. That's what those 2 things give you. And with too much extroversion, it's not a deep impact. It's just kind of like a shallow impact. And with too much introversion, it's just very isolated and slothful. Introverts and extroverts kind of have different issues, but the more and more healthy you are, I think the more and more people would tend to being like ambiverts and getting really mixed on the 2. I want to specify it has to be quality extroverted time and quality introverted time. Binging Netflix is not what I mean when I say get down to depth and wisdom and clarity. Watching Netflix is introverting, but I don't think that's really what's going to move the needle. So for ENFJs, their second function is introverted intuition. And the introverted functions distill down to clarity, and they get deep on the inside, and it's kind of organizing all the patterns that maybe you've seen. And it's, where is your life trending? Is college attendance trending up or down? Is mental health trending up or down? And it's taking the broader picture to look at trends. And some personalities will look at tons of trends, like college could be doing this, it could be doing this, could be doing this, could be doing this, and they kind of blast all the possibilities. But what introverted intuition does is it kind of narrows in and it says what is going to happen, and it's kind of making a prediction. In your own life and in whatever your interests are, kind of noticing trends and noticing patterns. It makes you really good at noticing patterns within other people. This is what makes ENFJs interested in philosophy. I've seen a lot into philosophy. I've seen a lot who want to be professors or who really enjoyed higher education. This is the function that I think really makes ENFJs visionary and really gives them some like intense, like really deep, impactful communication. Because when you're looking at the trend, and like let's say you're sitting down and you're having a conversation with a friend and you look at like how their life is trending, or you're noticing patterns in your life, and because of a little bit of FE and mixed with that NI, you can really see to like the heart of them. Like you can see deeply what's going on. The NI goes deep and the FE keys you into the other person. You really can just like know instantly what's going on with a person. And this is where you get kind of like, I don't want to call it like psychic, but this is where you can just like look at a person and know what they're feeling. This is what makes ENFJs really perceptive, really inspirational. NI is about the trends of your life. And if you want to help people and you're looking at the long-term impact of your life, sometimes a lot of ENFJs are interested in social causes. They want to make an impact on the world, have a very humanitarian bent. And this is where we get into some relationship stuff a little bit, because I think if ENFJs are watching this video, they're going to want this video to be focused on relationships a little bit more. And I've noticed a pattern with all of the FJ types, all of the extroverted feeling types. They're so keyed in on other people's feelings that sometimes they let bad people into their life. And if they're just focused on the present moment and not the long-term consequences, they kind of keep these people in. Kind of just focus on the present moment. I'll help them right now, help them right now, help them right now, help them right now. They're not realizing that that's kind of creating a bad future. When you meet someone, if you can really get into this process and say, where's this relationship going? And don't think about their potential. Think about getting to NI and say, realistically, where is this going? Where is this relationship trending? And if it's going in a bad direction and it's not going to be healthy, I think you should cut them out sooner rather than later, in a calm way. It's really good for ENFJs to really take care of themselves. I think a lot of FJs don't take care of themselves. And if you can get into NI, you can say, okay, this relationship's not going in a good direction. Maybe I should just cut it off before we get so invested, and it's going to be really messy. So I would say for ENFJs, NI is the function to boost up. It's your second function. It's like a potential strength. It's probably underused because it's introverted, but that is really what you should work on in many contexts of your life. Say, how can I look at the depth and the clarity and, philosophy and my vision and the future? How can I do that in my finances? How can I do that in my marriage, with my friendships, with what I eat, with the types of hobbies that I have, with the career that I have? And, just brainstorm in every single area of your life. How can you be using NI a little bit more? Because some people tend to use their second function in like 2 contexts of life, but it's important to use it over a broad context of life. So your third function is extroverted sensing, and everyone's third function tends to be kind of an overused weakness, especially when you're younger. Like if you're watching this, if you're in your teens and 20s, this function is really a sore spot for younger people. I've noticed for older people, they can kind of tend to integrate like all of their functions and do it pretty well. But the younger someone is, the more likely they're in this third function and they're using it in an infantile way, and honestly in kind of an annoying way. In my opinion, people annoy people. It's with this third function. So it's extroverted sensing, and extroverted sensing is all about the external senses. So looking at the sights and the sounds, and it's very immersed in the present moment. It's very in its body. Introverted intuition, extroverted sensing are opposites. They're like a yin yang. So introverted intuition is like in the mind, and extroverted sensing is in the body. Introverted intuition is in the future. Extroverted sensing is living like fully immersed in the present moment. And I wants to dissociate from the body and conserve energy, be in a dark room. SE wants to expend tons of energy and have lots of bright sounds and fun things and colors. If an ENFJ gets in what's called a loop, that's when you're in your first and third function, it creates a problem because those are both extroverted. And so like I talked about earlier, if you're too extroverted, you're losing the depth and impact and the clarity, and you become scattered and shallow. So what I've noticed people tend to do is it's kind of like a light switch with their second and third function. I mean, it's a polarity anyway, so you could say the first and fourth functions are like a light switch also, like you're doing this one or you're doing this one. But the thing is, with the first and fourth function, people are just always in their first function. Like, they never flip the light switch down to their fourth function. With the second and third function, I find that people are kind of switching back and forth all the time, and it would be better if it was switched up more often in NI than it was in SE. But people oscillate back and forth with their second and third function, and that oscillating creates a lot of problems in many different personalities. And I think for the ENFJ, this creates some issues. So, living in the present moment is good. I mean, especially for other personality types, but for the ENFJ, they tend to be doing that kind of negatively and kind of an avoidant way. Living in the present moment as a way to avoid the future, like staying in a relationship with someone for too long in the present moment to avoid the long-term consequence of having to cut off the relationship because you don't want to have a difficult conversation with someone. So everyone's third function is really kind of an avoidant thing, and people go there in arguments. Like I know some ENFJs who get like really like in their body during arguments. I think a big problem with ENFJs is just overbooking. Extroverted sensing is like, oh yeah, I want to do this, and it doesn't really think so much about long-term consequences. It's just like, oh, this person's right in front of me right now, so I got to say yes to them. And that leads to a lot of overbooking and running ragged. It's in too much extroversion. That means you're not going to get enough time to really think about what you want. Extrovert sensing can be about appearances. It's really, it's very focused on like, what do things look like in the external world. So a lot of ENFJs I know are really attractive. ENJs in general, I find, for my preferences, dress very attractively. But there's one ENFJ I know, and I've heard this many times, which is kind of an unfortunate thing, actually. But I have friends, like, they're like, she is so nice and so pretty. And they were like, how come she's never dated anyone? Because she like, really wants to date someone. She's been single for a long time, and she hasn't really dated anyone. And she's, like, so attractive. She's so nice. People are like, why isn't she dating anyone? She wants to date. It seems like everything's great. Like, what's the deal? In my opinion, what I think it is she doesn't have enough introverted intuition. People don't ever get to know her. Extroverted feeling is always asking about the other person, and extroverted sensing is also extroverted, so it's seeking things in the external world. And no one knows her. No one knows her introverted intuition. No one knows her thoughts and her, like, she is philosophical. She's intellectual. I've had very intellectual conversations with her, but it really takes a lot to draw that out of her. It's a lot of, sometimes ENFJs can really ask a lot about the other person. Oh, I want to fix all your problems. I want to know all about you. And they forget, like, their own problems, and, it means the relationship's kind of one-sided. And you have to think, like, if you have a lot of one-sided relationships where you feel like you really know the other person, they don't really know you, you've got to think, like, you're the common denominator in that pattern. I don't mean to be, like, critical. I mean, I say this sort of things to all the personalities. I love ENFJs. So I don't want you to think that I'm, like, criticizing you or anything. I just want you to be the best that you can be. And really the only criticism is just to, like, show me more of who you are. And I think sometimes ENFJs help other people so much, but they have their own issues going on inside. And if they stopped avoiding the introverted time, that stuff would come up, and you would start thinking about your future and where that's going. That'd be some really good, like, meditative time. What's your purpose? Why are you on this earth? Like, what do you want to be doing with your life? And, if you spend too much time extroverting, you can't really answer those questions. And so you avoid by asking other people those questions and helping other people with all their problems. But I think it's really important for the ENFJ to make sure that their life is, like, really good. And try to force yourself that you need to get the introvert time every day before you get the extrovert time, because you're always going to prioritize the people. You prioritize the people the people you love. Like, that's not going to be an issue for you, but it is going to be difficult for you to prioritize yourself. So I would just challenge you every day, prioritize yourself first in a deep way, asking yourself the deep questions. What am I made for? What's my life purpose? Why am I here? What do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do with my career? Long-term future things. And then you can use a little bit of SE to be doing that today. So you got the future, you know exactly what you want for your future, and you do that daily. But sometimes ENFJs can be kind of forgetful of the future, and just they're living in the present moment at the expense of the future. So ENFJ's fourth function is introverted thinking, and everyone's fourth function, especially when they're younger, just seems to be turned off. Like, if it's the light switch analogy like I talked about, you're an extroverted feeling 98% of the time, which means you are 2% of the time in introverted thinking. And I've just noticed the younger people are, the more likely that is to be true. So this is another introverted function. So this would be another point that'd be good for you to bump up. I don't think you should become an introverted thinker. But let's say, like, if you're using introverted thinking 2% of the time, maybe you could try to bump that up to 10% of the time. I think people's back functions really what causes issues in relationships. Like, I think your front two functions, like, you just go all the way. Like, if you're in a career setting, like, I think your first two functions, like, you just go. But then when you're in relationships, the biggest hangups are your weaknesses. Like, at work, you can just kind of, like, go to town on your strengths. Your weaknesses will be managed with other employees. But when you're in, like, relationships, it's really important to kind of work on those back two functions, because there's not any other employees managing your weaknesses, and it just, like, hurts your spouse or whoever. So yeah, anyways, all that to say, maybe just bump introverted thinking up from, like, 2% to 10%. So introverted thinking and extroverted feeling, they're opposites. Introverted thinking has really no problem with conflict. The types that lead with introverted thinking, like, the ENTP doesn't lead with it, but it's second, and they're, like, known as the debater. INTPs are known to, argue and debate things also. And it's from a very impersonal place, and they just like to do it. It's not hurting anyone's feelings. They don't get their feelings hurt if they argue. Other people aren't getting their feelings hurt. these types just like to do it, and they just like to sharpen their ideas. It's not personal, and they feel like really recharged, and they enjoy the experience afterward, especially if it was like very intellectual. As soon as it gets personal, I think that's when the introverted thinking users aren't going to like it anymore. So I think for the ENFJ, when they have introverted thinking and they're not using it that much, it can make you kind of conflict avoidant. And I think that would be something to work on, expressing your controversial thoughts, expressing your needs. Just practice, like, it would be better to have 5 minutes of small conflict than an hour of, like, I don't say raging. That makes ENFJ sound terrible. It's not really as bad as I'm making it sound. But better than like an hour of like raging conflict that really hurts people, So I would just say, like, stick up for your needs. Like, if something hurt your feelings, learn some good conflict resolution skills. Sometimes the best way to avoid conflict is just, to engage in a difficult conversation. And ENFJs have great communication skills, especially you get into, FEs tuned into the other person, and I is really tuned into their perspective and what they might be thinking. And ENFJs have great levels of empathy, so I think you could be great, you're one of the best types to be great in difficult conversations, I think. So if you could just like stick up for your needs and say, you know what, it's going to be a small little conflict, call it a little micro conflict, and then we'll be good. I think it's hard for ENFJ sometimes to get criticism. I think all the FJs are just a little sensitive to criticism, and I think it's because that puts you potentially in introverted thinking. Introverted thinking kind of criticizes its own thoughts, it assesses its own beliefs, like, what do I think about things? Let's make sure I'm not believing any lies. And it kind of like checks itself all the time. It's always like cleaning out its beliefs. I'm wrong here, so I'll get rid of that. I'm wrong here, so I'll get rid of that. And once your fourth function, that can just be very like overly critical of yourself. And I just feel so sad for any of the ENFJs that criticize themselves too harshly. And I could imagine that if an ENFJ was given criticism during that conversation, they'd be like, oh yeah, and they'd be so receptive, and I can imagine that you'd be great in a conversation about criticism. I imagine what would happen is then after the conversation, you go and like you really beat yourself up about it. I don't want any ENFJs to beat themselves up. Like, I think ENFJs are a great personality. And if you can just give yourself some more like self-acceptance, like it's okay to have controversial beliefs. It's okay if you win at a board game and other people lose. Like, it's okay if you win at the expense of other people. Like, it's just a game. Like, your needs are important. Like, you are included in the needs of everyone. And to spend some alone time not taking care of other people is a really good thing for you to do. And I think it's the healthiest thing that you could ultimately do for everyone in your life. If you really want to take care of everyone in your life, you have to take care of yourself first. And I really, really, really mean that. I've been around some EFJs who refuse to take care of themselves, and it ends up poisoning like the atmosphere of the home. And it's kind of the phrase, like, if mom's not happy, no one's happy. And I think that's a prime extroverted feeling phrase. It's like extroverted feelers are so good at setting the tone. And 98% of the time they set a really good tone. But that 2% of the time when the mom or the extroverted feeler is not happy, it really poisons the environment. And so I just urge you to say, if you won't do it for yourself, do it for the people around you. Because it is in the people's around you best interest for you to take care of yourself. And it's clearly in your best interest. But I think ENFJs are so just like selfless that they might not want to do that. So I just encourage you, like, take time for yourself. Another thing I say was if you develop a little bit of introverted thinking says things like exactly how it means, says it very precisely. It's not emotional. It's not hurting anyone's feelings. It just kind of like will state facts, or the people that use introverted thinking will state facts. I think that's a good thing to like just not be passive aggressive. Like, don't drop hints. Dropping hints is just like not an introverted thinking way of communicating. Just say like exactly what you mean what you say. Just don't assume that other people are anticipating needs in the way that you are. Like, you're excellent at anticipating needs. Other people who are not extroverted feeling users are not doing that. And they're not doing it because they hate you. They're not doing it, to spite you or to be mean. They are just using different parts of the brain that also contribute something valuable to the world. And that's kind of sad that, like, unless you're around an extroverted feeling user, they're probably not going to be taking care of you to the level that you take care of other people. And that's probably just like a need that is somewhat going to go unmet. And just know that they have their own strengths that they're bringing to the table. And it's just it's the cost of specialization. They have their other gifts, and the cost of that is maybe they're not anticipating needs like you are. So if they're not anticipating needs like that, if you have a need, you got to really just come out and say it black and white. You got to think in that for you to express what you need, you have to have gone in and thought about in an introverted way what you need. And then once you've had time alone and you've thought about what you need, like, if I could have my way in this situation, this is what would happen. And when you think about that, then you can kind of clearly communicate that to people. But you got to take the introverted time to think about what you want, and then you got to use the introverted thinking to express it in a clear way. And ENFJ's unique gift to the world is their outstanding communication. And I want to just like get into that like more deeply. Like, they are incredible communicators. I have never met anyone who communicates as well, in my opinion, as ENFJs. From a stage, one-on-one, in a group, like they are great with people and moving a room and communicating in a deep way. I knew an ENFJ, and she really got into introverted intuition, and in my opinion, she was really into philosophy, and in college, she wanted to be a professor. She thought about being an interviewer, and I saw her on a panel, and she was kind of the one asking the questions on this panel, and she would just get like deeper and deeper with these questions. I mean, she made like a fantastic interviewer. I knew another ENFJ who was a professor. I knew another ENFJ who was a counselor. I knew one ENFJ who was a counselor and a professor, like switched careers. And one of them, she's just an outstanding professor. I mean, she made being a professor be like a counselor role. It was like the whole class was being counseled at once. It was like this group counseling session. It was really good. It was an incredibly safe environment, incredibly deep. This particular ENFJ was also vulnerable about herself, which I think was really brave. One way to create a good extroverted feeling culture, is to share about yourself and be vulnerable, and that kind of spreads to the whole group, and she really knew how to do that. I knew one ENFJ. This was like in a church setting, and she would come up and talk to everyone. And when she was with you, you just feel like she was with you. If ENFJs are unhealthy, they're kind of like, distractible and with extroverted sensing. But this ENFJ, she was like with you. Like, NI has an intense focus. Like, it is like focused on the other person. And when they look at you in the eyes, it's like they are seeing into your soul. I knew another ENFJ who was a worship team leader. It was he's incredibly positive and uplifting. He is constantly giving very specific compliments to the character of the person. Really just saying this is your identity. He would just say things the compliments he would give there, they're just great, I call it juicy compliments. This ENFJ, he would say, he's the way you play the guitar just moves people, and he would much longer compliment than what I just said, but it's stuff like that. That's not just good guitar playing. It's the way you play guitar moves people and is very impactful, and there's something very special about you. And he would they're very good at pulling out the gold nuggets in people and just highlighting that. I think that's such an ENFJ gift. I think sometimes people don't know what's special about them. They don't know what their strengths are, and ENFJs can pull it out. ENFJs make phenomenal leaders, phenomenal communicators. ENFJs are just the full package. I don't know if you've heard of Love Who. He's another MBTI YouTuber. And he'll do these ranking videos, type most likely to be popular, type most likely to be intelligent. He kind of ranks them. And ENFJs rank highly in every category. They do very well. They're just very well rounded. They can be good with people. They can have deep intellectual conversations. They're also just super fun. I've been to some ENFJs that are just kind of life of the party. They'll go on, I've seen some that are really in their body and they'll run. They're usually so attractive, in really good shape in my experience. And I just love being around them. I knew one ENFJ who had a coffee shop business, and the way he ran a coffee shop is just different than other people run a coffee shop. I mean, he knew the names of people, and they would come in. He would just ask deep questions, and it's always with that tone of voice. I just cannot express enough their tone of voice that they have. It's just so soothing. Those be hey, how are you doing? And something about it just feels like if you have anxious energy coming in, the way they talk to you just calms it down. Now that I'm thinking about it, they probably know that I have anxious energy, and so they're trying to do that. Oh no, you've probably been watching my energy this whole time. Well, full disclosure, I have been anxious to film this video because I know the least about ENFJs than I know any other types. I know probably 5 ENFJs, and they're all stellar. So when I sit here and try to give advice about what ENFJs need to work on, all I know are really great ENFJs. I've heard of stories from other people that have met unhealthy ENFJs, but all I know are really great ENFJs. So I'm okay, growth advice for these amazing people. You don't need to solve all the world's problems at once. I think extroverted sensing has that chaotic energy that's we gotta do this, we gotta do this, we gotta do this, we gotta do this, solving all the world's problem. I'll help you, and I'll help you, and I'll help you. You know, you have permission to think about what you want out of life, to think about your long-term vision, your life purpose, and what do you want. And you just have permission to zone in and focus in on what you want. Because whatever it is, whatever you selfishly want, that's what's in the world's best interest. That's what's in your family's best interest, your friends' best interest, for you to selfishly go after your long-term vision in an introverted way, to spend time alone, thinking about your vision, some, you know, really deep introverted time, thinking about that and fleshing that out. That's what's in everyone else's best interest. I love you guys. I'm hoping that it didn't come off critical at all, because I have no bad things to say about you. I'm just thinking about like what potentially could be happening based on these cognitive functions. My real life experience with the ENFJs is only positive. So I do offer coaching. If you're interested, I could do like type verification, personality coaching, just to pick my brain session. You can DM me on Instagram for that. My Instagram account is Alexis M. Kingsley, and I post more like list things on there, like more like bite-sized things. Whereas here it's more of a deep dive. So if you're interested, go ahead and check it out. I will pop on screen right now. I do have a playlist, Myers Briggs 101 playlist, like I mentioned, which goes from like most simple to most complex. Yeah, hopefully it didn't come off too critical. Thanks. Bye.